The Galactic War Academy was one of the most famous training schools in the galaxy. Cadets from hundreds of different species came there to learn combat, strategy, and survival. Only the strongest and smartest students could graduate from the academy. The academy halls were always full of noise. Large alien cadets walked proudly in their armored uniforms. Some were tall and thin, some had thick scales, and some had glowing eyes. Every species had its own strengths, but there was one rule every cadet understood. Strength meant respect. Weakness meant trouble. And no one in the academy showed weakness for long. On that morning, something unusual happened. A new student arrived. Whispers slowly spread through the main hall as students noticed him. A human. Many cadets turned their heads. Humans were not common in the academy. In fact, very few humans had ever studied there before. The human walked calmly through the large hall. He wore a simple academy uniform. His steps were steady and quiet. His name was Daniel Hayes. He looked younger than most cadets. His brown hair was short, and his eyes moved carefully around the room. He seemed to be studying everything. Some alien students watched him with curiosity. Others smiled with amusement. To many species in the galaxy, humans were still considered new and inexperienced. Their civilization had only recently joined the larger galactic community. That meant something important inside the academy. Many cadets believed humans were weak. At the far side of the hall, a large group of students suddenly became quiet. Someone very important had noticed a human. His name was Kraxar. Kraxar was one of the most feared cadets in the academy. His species came from a heavy gravity planet. His body was huge and powerful. Thick dark scales covered his arms, and two curved horns rose from his head. He had already defeated many other students in combat training. Some said even the instructors watched him carefully, because Kraxar didn't just like to win. He liked to dominate. No one in the academy wanted to become his next target. Kraxar leaned back in his chair and watched the human walk through the hall. For a moment he said nothing. Then a slow smile appeared on his face. Well, he muttered. The cadets around him looked nervous. One of them whispered, "Leave him alone, Kraxar. He just arrived." But Kraxar stood up. The metal floor vibrated slightly as his heavy body moved forward. "That makes it more interesting," he replied. Across the hall, Daniel had just reached the central corridor when he noticed something strange. The noise around him suddenly faded. Conversation stopped. Students moved away from the center path. Daniel slowly turned his head. A massive alien was walking toward him. Each step was slow and heavy. The giant stopped a few meters away from the human. Daniel looked up calmly. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. Then Kraxar laughed loudly. "So you are the human?" Daniel nodded slightly. "Yes." Kraxar circled around him slowly, studying him like a predator studying prey. "You look smaller than I expected." Several cadets watched from a safe distance. Some looked excited. Others looked worried. Daniel remained calm. "I just arrived," he said quietly. Kraxar leaned closer. "That means you don't know the rules here." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "What rules?" The bully spread his arms. "The rules of survival." A few students backed away even further. They had seen this situation many times before. Kraxar always tested new students. Sometimes the fights ended quickly. Sometimes they ended badly. High above the hall, inside the observation balcony, two instructors noticed the growing crowd. One of them frowned. "That's Kraxar again." The other instructor sighed. "And the new human." They began walking toward the elevator that would take them down to the hall. But the academy was large. It would take a little time to reach them. Back on the floor, Kraxar cracked his massive knuckles. "You know," he said loudly, "every new student must prove they belong here." Daniel remained still. "And how do they do that?" he asked. Kraxar smiled again. "They survived their first challenge." Without warning, he shoved the human hard. Gasps echoed through the watching crowd. But something strange happened. Daniel barely moved. His boots slid a few centimeters across the metal floor. That was all. Kraxar blinked. The push should have thrown the human several meters. Some cadets exchanged confused looks. Daniel adjusted his balance calmly. Then he looked back at the giant alien. "Was that the challenge?" he asked. The calm tone surprised many students. Kraxar's smile slowly disappeared. Now he was annoyed. "You're either brave," he growled, "or very stupid." Daniel shrugged lightly. "Maybe neither." That answer made several students whisper nervously. Kraxar stepped closer. Now the difference in size looked even more extreme. The alien towered over the human like a living wall. "You should be afraid," Kraxar said. Daniel tilted his head slightly. "Why?" The bully suddenly swung his arm. His fist moved fast toward the human's face. The watching students expected the human to be knocked across the hall. But Daniel moved. Just a little. His head shifted a few centimeters. Kraxar's fist cut through empty air. The giant's momentum carried him forward. His fist smashed into a nearby metal pillar. The loud impact echoed across the hall. The pillar dented deeply. Silence spread through the crowd. Kraxar slowly pulled his hand back. His eyes narrowed. That shouldn't have happened. Daniel calmly stepped away from the pillar. "You might want to be careful," he said. "You could hurt yourself." A few cadets covered their mouths to hide their reactions. No one spoke to Kraxar like that. The bully turned slowly toward the human again. Now his anger was clear. "You dodged," he said. Daniel shrugged. "You swung." For a moment the entire hall felt tense. The fight was becoming real. Above them, the instructors finally reached the elevator. The doors opened slowly, but they were still several corridors away. Back in the hall, Kraxar rolled his shoulders. "This time," he said quietly, "don't move." He lunged forward again, but something about the human had changed. Daniel's eyes were now focused, calm, calculating. The giant fist rushed toward him, and the watching students held their breath, because suddenly, they were not sure who would win. Just before the punch connected, Daniel moved again, but this time, he didn't dodge, he caught the giant's fist. The entire hall froze. Kraxar's massive arm stopped in the human's grip. For a second, no one believed what they were seeing. The human stood perfectly still, holding the bully's attack like it weighed nothing. Kraxar's eyes widened slightly, and for the first time since the fight began, the giant looked surprised. Daniel slowly looked up at him. His voice remained calm. "You should stop now." But Kraxar only growled, because he had just realized something disturbing. The human was not struggling, not even a little. And far down the corridor, the instructors finally began running toward the hall. But they were already too late, because the fight had just begun. The hall was silent. Every cadet in the room watched in disbelief. Kraxar, the largest and most feared cadet in the Galactic War Academy, stared at the human who held his massive fist effortlessly. His eyes were wide, and for the first time in years, he felt fear creeping into his chest. Daniel Hayes stood calmly, his posture straight and relaxed. Sweat did not glisten on his forehead. His uniform was untouched. Nothing about him suggested he had just stopped a punch that could crush bones. Some alien cadets whispered to each other. Did he just catch Kraxar's punch?" One said, trembling. "Impossible," another replied. "No human could survive that." Kraxar growled low in his throat. He had been humiliated in front of hundreds of cadets before. But this was unthinkable. Daniel tilted his head slightly. "You're strong," he said softly. "But strength isn't everything." The words made some cadets snicker nervously. But Kraxar did not. Kraxar's rage boiled over. He lunged again. This time, he moved faster. His combat training had prepared him for any opponent, and he knew how to predict attacks. Every muscle in his body moved like a machine built for war. Daniel didn't move at first. He simply watched, analyzing, calculating. He didn't flinch. The first blow landed, not on Daniel, but on the floor beside him. The hall shook as Kraxar's fist struck metal so hard it dented the floor panel. Sparks flew. The cadets gasped. "You're lucky," Daniel said quietly. Kraxar's nostrils flared. Luck? There was no luck in this hall. Only skill. And he had mastered skill better than anyone. But the human wasn't reacting like other cadets had. Most students would have screamed, run, or cried. Daniel was not doing any of that. Kraxar swung again, this time aiming for the human's chest. But Daniel grabbed his arm, and again, Kraxar's strength seemed useless. He could not push the human back. The hall went quiet. Even the instructors, now rushing down the corridors, paused in shock. "What kind of human is this?" one instructor whispered. The cadets began to murmur nervously. Many had never seen a human cadet before, but they had all heard stories. Humans were fragile, weak, young. Their world's gravity was strong, yes, but they lacked training in serious combat compared to other species. And yet, here was Daniel, stopping one of the strongest cadets in the academy without breaking a sweat. Kraxar roared. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. His pride, his reputation, everything he had built, was being shattered by a single human. He pulled back and slammed both fists on the floor in frustration. Sparks flew from the metal surface. Daniel didn't move. He watched silently, eyes calm, body relaxed, almost bored. "Stop resisting," Kraxar growled. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "I'm not resisting," he said softly. "You're attacking me. That's your choice." The giant cadet froze. The hall was still. Every cadet, every alien, every observer was holding their breath. Then, slowly, Kraxar activated his combat armor. It hissed as energy shields extended around his arms and legs. This was forbidden in training fights. Only in extreme situations could cadet use this armor inside the academy hall. The teachers shouted from a distance, "Kraxar, deactivate that armor. Now." But Kraxar ignored them. The armor glowed red. His fists became enormous. His muscles bulged even more. Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly. He understood. Kraxar was taking the fight seriously now. He had realized the human wasn't just a weak cadet. He was something else. The crowd of cadets scattered back, some ducking behind pillars, some pressed against walls. The hall seemed too small for such a battle. Sparks from Kraxar's armor danced on the walls, throwing shadows across the faces of terrified students. Daniel finally took a small step forward. Kraxar lunged again. The impact shook the hall like a thunderstorm. Metal floors bent under the force. Some cadets lost their balance and slid across the hall. But Daniel moved again. He didn't dodge. He absorbed the impact. His body barely bent, barely shifted. His legs flexed, and the enormous energy from Kraxar's punch seemed to flow through him and vanish. Some cadets gasped. One whispered, He's like a rock." Kraxar stopped mid-strike. His armor hummed, energy rippling across its surface. He looked at Daniel and realized the human wasn't struggling. Not at all. Daniel's eyes now glowed faintly. Not with energy, but with focus. Calm, calculating focus. "You are strong," Daniel said softly. "But control is better." Kraxar's mouth opened, and a low growl escaped. Rage mixed with confusion. His fists were trembling slightly. No cadet had ever challenged him like this. Not in 10 years. Not ever. Then, Daniel did something unexpected. He stepped forward slowly. One step, then another. The hall held its breath. Kraxar tried to swing, but the human was already there. His hand tapped lightly on Kraxar's chest. The force of the touch wasn't strong, but Kraxar's entire body shivered. The red glow of his armor flickered. Daniel looked up at him. "Stop," he said again, calm and soft. Kraxar's eyes widened. His pride screamed at him to fight, but something inside warned him to listen. But Kraxar didn't stop. He activated his hidden weapon in the armor, a small energy cannon built into his gauntlet. The blast was deadly. Students ducked. Some screamed. Daniel didn't flinch. The energy beam hit him directly. A blinding light filled the hall. Everyone expected a scream, a collapse, perhaps even death. But when the light dimmed, Daniel was still standing. His uniform had small burns. His skin showed no mark. Nothing was broken. A whisper spread across the hall. How is he still standing? The instructors arrived at the scene, panting. "Kraxar, step back. This is forbidden," one yelled. Kraxar's face was red. Sweat dripped down his horns. He had underestimated the human completely. Daniel stepped closer to him again. Not fast, not slow. Calm, steady. "You should stop now," he said. Kraxar's knees shook. His pride, his strength, his reputation, all crushed in front of dozens of cadets. The crowd of aliens slowly realized the truth. Humans were not weak. They were something entirely different. Daniel didn't say anything more. He simply stood tall, eyes scanning the hall. Calm, confident, unshakable. For the first time, the academy had a silent rule echo through the halls. Never underestimate a human. Even the instructors seemed stunned. Some nodded slowly, as if understanding the story of humans that they hadn't known before. Kraxar collapsed to the floor, exhausted. His armor hummed down. His massive fists rested on the metal floor. Humiliation filled his body. But more than that, fear. Daniel walked past him, ignoring the whispers and gasps from the crowd. The human cadet had survived his first encounter at the Galactic War Academy. But more than survival, he had left everyone with a lesson they would never forget. No one dared to challenge him after that. Some cadets whispered, "He's not just strong. He's unstoppable." And far above in the observation balcony, the instructors exchanged serious glances. "This is going to change everything," one said. The other nodded slowly. "Yes, humans are not weak. We've underestimated them for too long." The first shock of the academy was complete, but no one realized that this was only the beginning, because Daniel Hayes was not just any cadet. He was a human predator, calm, precise, and restrained. And his story at the academy had only just begun. The hall was silent. The cadets stared at Daniel Hayes, the human who had just humiliated Kraxar, the most feared student in the academy. Some had never seen anything like it. Some couldn't believe their eyes. Even Kraxar himself sat on the floor, breathing heavily. His pride was shattered, his ego bruised. But underneath it all, fear lingered. He had fought many opponents before, but none like this. None who could stand firm against his full strength. Daniel did not move. His eyes scanned the hall. Calm, observant. Every muscle in his body was ready. He had survived attacks that would have broken any cadet. And yet, he looked ordinary. Ordinary but deadly. Far above in the observation balcony, instructors whispered among themselves. "This is not normal," one said. "No human should have this control," the other replied. "Even with their gravity adaptation, this is beyond expectations." The truth about humans was rarely known among the wider galactic community. Most alien species assumed humans were fragile. Their history in the Galactic Council was short. Their technology was still new. Their armies were few. And yet somehow, humans always survived. Daniel stepped forward slowly. The cadets instinctively moved back, giving him space. His calm, measured movements created tension in the hall. Every student, alien and human alike, understood something terrifying. This human was different. Kraxar struggled to stand. His massive hands clenched into fists. You are not normal," he growled. Daniel's lips curved into a small smile. "Maybe you'll understand soon," he said quietly. Kraxar's anger boiled over. He activated a hidden weapon in his gauntlet again, a small energy blade, crackling with destructive energy. The crowd gasped. This weapon was illegal in standard academy duels. Using it could earn Kraxar immediate expulsion. But he didn't care. Humiliation had driven him beyond reason. The energy blade flared. Its heat and light filled the hall. Sparks flew from the walls. Some cadets ducked behind pillars. Others watched in awe. Daniel didn't move back. He simply raised his hand slightly. Not to attack, not to block. Just a simple movement. Kraxar charged. His enormous frame moved faster than anyone expected. The energy blade swung toward Daniel with deadly speed. And then, Daniel caught it. The crowd screamed. He didn't struggle. He didn't wobble. He simply held the blade, his fingers wrapped around it with perfect control. Kraxar's eyes widened in disbelief. His weapon, built to cut through any material in the academy, did nothing. "You how?" Kraxar stammered. Daniel's voice remained calm. "It's not about strength," he said. "It's about balance." The instructors arrived at the hall finally, shouting, "Step back, both of you." But the cadets barely noticed. Their eyes were glued to Daniel, the human who defied every expectation. Daniel pushed the energy blade lightly. Kraxar stumbled backward slightly. Every movement of the human was precise. Every action was calculated. There was no waste, no hesitation. It was not just power. It was control. The cadets began whispering. "Do you see that? He's not just strong. He's perfect," another muttered. And the whispers grew louder. Even some of the instructors shook their heads. They had seen elite cadets from every species, but humans like this were unheard of. Kraxar roared again. His pride, his fury, his entire being demanded respect. He had never been challenged like this. He activated another system in his combat armor, an energy shield that could deflect anything smaller than his own strength. But Daniel didn't panic. He stepped closer, just enough to avoid the blast from Kraxar's shield. The human's movement was smooth, almost casual. Then something happened that no one expected. Daniel clenched his fists, and energy, not visible, but perceptible, flowed through his body. He didn't attack. He didn't strike. He simply stood firm, and the energy around him seemed to push Kraxar's shield backward. The bully staggered. His armor vibrated. Sparks flew from the energy field. The hall went quiet. No one moved. Even the instructors held their breath. A cadet whispered, "He's absorbing it?" Another replied, "No, he's controlling it, like he owns the energy." Kraxar's hand shook. He tried to swing the energy blade again, but it felt heavy, almost wrong. The human wasn't just resisting, it dominated. Daniel took a step forward. Just one. That was enough. Kraxar felt the weight of the human's presence. Something inside him screamed to stop, to retreat, but his pride would not allow it. "You should give up," Daniel said softly. Kraxar's jaw tightened. "Never." Daniel's eyes flicked toward the observers. The cadets, the instructors, they all watched silently, afraid to breathe too loudly. Then Daniel did something extraordinary. He lifted one hand, not to punch, not to strike, but simply lifted it toward Kraxar. The energy in the hall shifted. Kraxar felt the full force of the human's presence. The air seemed to move differently. Sparks from his armor dimmed. His body trembled. For the first time, Kraxar realized something terrifying. Humans were not just resilient. They were predators disguised as weak creatures. He had underestimated Daniel completely. The energy blade slipped slightly in his hands. His massive frame shook. He tried to charge again, but his movements felt slow. Too slow. Daniel didn't attack. He just stepped forward. His presence alone was enough to dominate the hall. "Stop now," Daniel said again. This time, Kraxar's knees buckled. He collapsed to the floor, gasping. His weapon deactivated automatically. His energy shield flickered out. Humiliation and fear filled him. The cadets stared, their mouths open. They had just witnessed a human overpower, one of the most feared aliens in the academy, without even trying to hurt him. The instructors finally spoke, but even their voices sounded weak compared to the aura of control Daniel radiated. "This human, he's not like the others," one whispered. "No," the other replied. "He's a secret weapon." The hall slowly returned to normal. Cadets whispered among themselves. Aliens glanced nervously at one another. Even Kraxar avoided Daniel's gaze. Daniel turned slightly and looked around. His calm demeanor remained. His movements were simple, yet every step radiated power. Then he spoke quietly, but enough for everyone to hear. "I don't seek fights, but I will not be tested like that." Silence fell. Every cadet understood. Humans were not weak. They were not fragile. They were restrained, controlled, and deadly. From that day, the story of Daniel Hayes spread across the academy, not just as a survivor, but as a human who could dominate the strongest cadets without raising a hand. Kraxar would never forget it. The shame, the fear, the realization that humans were different. He would carry it for the rest of his life. The other cadets began to treat Daniel differently. Some with respect, some with fear, some with quiet curiosity. Even the instructors, who had studied combat for decades, knew one truth. Humans were not to be underestimated. And Daniel, he simply walked through the hall, calm, measured, and confident. The first shock of his presence had passed, but the human secret, the true extent of his power, was still hidden. Because Daniel Hayes was only beginning to show what a human could truly do. The academy had learned one lesson that day. Quiet ones were often the most dangerous, and Daniel was the quietest of all. The academy hall was still trembling from the events of the previous day. Cadets whispered in corners. Some avoided the central corridor entirely. Aliens of every species glanced nervously at each other. Even the instructors moved cautiously, as if they had never seen a human cadet behave like this before. Daniel Hayes walked calmly down the corridor. His steps were soft, but each one echoed like authority. Nothing about him seemed extraordinary to an outsider, but those who had seen him fight knew the truth. He was not ordinary. Kraxar lay on the floor, his massive body shaking with humiliation and fear. Even after a night of sleep, he could not shake the image of the human who had stopped his attacks without struggle. He had underestimated Daniel completely, and now he feared him. Some cadets watched from the sidelines, daring not to step into the corridor. Every eye followed Daniel. Every movement he made drew attention. But Daniel didn't care about the attention. He had other matters in mind. The instructors arrived, finally confronting the human. Daniel Hayes. One called sternly, "You have disrupted Academy rules. Fighting with a cadet of Kraxar's strength is dangerous. Do you understand the consequences?" Daniel's eyes scanned the instructors. Calm, unwavering. "I understand," he said simply. "But I did not attack first. He tested me." The instructors exchanged glances. One of them, older and wiser, nodded slowly. "True," he said. "But this is not just about rules. There's something unusual about you, human. Something we have not seen in any cadet before." Daniel tilted his head slightly. He knew what the instructor meant. The truth about humans was rarely shared openly in the galaxy. Most alien species believed humans were fragile, weak, or inexperienced. They did not know the secret, and he had no intention of telling them yet. The cadets murmured among themselves. "He's not just strong," one whispered. "He's controlled. Perfect. He's calm," another said. "Like he's untouchable." Daniel approached Kraxar. The bully struggled to stand, but the human did not raise a hand in attack. He simply stood over him. "You should have stopped," Daniel said quietly. Kraxar's breathing was heavy. His pride screamed at him to respond, but his body refused. He had felt something in Daniel that he had never felt before. Something that could not be overcome with strength alone. The other cadets held their breath. No one moved. Some leaned against pillars. Some pressed their backs to walls. Even the aliens, who were naturally brave, felt a pang of fear. Daniel's calm presence was overwhelming. Finally, Kraxar spoke, voice shaking. You're not normal." Daniel nodded slightly. "No," he said softly. "I am a human, and we are not what you think." The hall went silent. A few cadets laughed nervously. Some muttered, thinking the human was bragging. But they were wrong. Daniel did not brag. His confidence was quiet, restrained, absolute. "I don't seek fights," he continued, "but I will not allow anyone to humiliate me or others without consequence." A younger cadet, trembling with curiosity, asked, "But how did you stop Kraxar?" Daniel looked at him. Not in anger, not in amusement, just calm, measured observation. "Humans are different," he said. "We are stronger than most species believe. Faster, tougher, and we think differently. We don't fight blindly. We control every move, every force, every attack. We survive because we plan, and we endure because we restrain ourselves until the right moment." The words hung in the air. Cadets and instructors alike felt a shift. Something had changed. The human who had arrived quietly yesterday was no longer just a student. He was a force to be reckoned with. Kraxar finally rose to his feet, shaking. His armor still hummed faintly, sparks falling from it. He looked at Daniel, eyes wide. "You restrained yourself," he said. "You could have destroyed me." Daniel nodded. "Yes, but I choose not to. Most humans do not seek conflict unnecessarily. We fight only when needed. That is our advantage. That is why we survive." The cadets exchanged glances. A few aliens muttered under their breath. "Restrain themselves," one said. "Then imagine what they do when they don't restrain themselves." Daniel's calm gaze swept over the hall. He didn't need to say more. The students understood. Humans were not just young or weak. Humans were predators, controlled, precise, and deadly. One of the instructors, an older alien with silver eyes, finally stepped forward. This changes everything," he said quietly. "The galaxy has underestimated humans for too long. They are stronger, faster, and more durable than we imagined." Daniel nodded slightly, acknowledging the truth without pride. Kraxar knelt slightly, acknowledging defeat. His ego was bruised, but he had learned something important. Do not underestimate a human. From that day forward, the halls of the Galactic War Academy were filled with whispers about Daniel Hayes. Stories spread among the cadets. A human who could stop the most feared bully without struggle. A human who restrained himself, yet could dominate anyone if he chose. Even the instructors were shaken. They had seen elite cadets from dozens of species, but no one had ever demonstrated control and power like Daniel. The academy changed. Rules about testing new cadets were rewritten. Warnings about humans were issued to every student. Do not underestimate them, instructors said. You may think they are weak. You may think they are young, but they are restrained predators, and one day they may show their full strength. Daniel himself continued his training, calm as ever. No one challenged him again openly. Cadets gave him space. Teachers observed quietly, and even Kraxar avoided him in future sparring sessions. But Daniel's presence was more than just physical. His calm dominance sent a message across the academy. Humans were not weak. Humans were restrained. And the galaxy would soon realize that restraint was only the beginning. Because humans, when pushed, were unstoppable. And Daniel Hayes was only the first. By the end of the week, every cadet, every instructor, and every alien species attending the academy had learned a simple truth. Quiet ones are often the most dangerous. Even the Galactic Council, who occasionally visited the academy to watch elite cadets train, heard of the human who dominated the strongest alien without fighting seriously. Their reports spread across the galaxy. From that moment, humans became more than a young, weak species. They became a mystery, a force to be respected, feared, and studied. And Daniel, he continued walking the halls, calm, quiet, confident. He trained like any other cadet. He spoke when necessary, and he intervened only when he had to. But the story of the day, the story of Kraxar and the human who stopped him, would be remembered for generations. The academy had learned a lesson the hard way, and the galaxy would never forget. Final HFY climax line. The galaxy had thought humans were young, weak, and untested, but the academy learned something terrifying that day. Humans were not weak, they were restrained. And restrained humans were the deadliest force in the galaxy.